Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to bring you an interview with Chloé Moore, the founder of Financial Staples, a fee-only firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Chloé is a total rock star and has had a really impressive career up until this point. She started out like many of us, working as an associate advisor for a couple of different RIAs. What makes her story unique, however, is instead of diving off the deep end to start her own firm, she first started doing business consulting for RIAs. She became an outsourced operations manager, leveraging her skill set in building processes to help advisors be more efficient. Once she built that business up, then she started her RIA. Her long-term goal is to spend about 50% of her time in each of the two businesses and has set very clear revenue goals for herself. I love how intentional she is with what she's building and staying focused on her why, which is something I think most advisors can learn from. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/88. In addition to the typical resources, you'll find a link to our recently launched book, co-authored by Kitsis and myself, titled The Monthly Retainer Model, What It Is, Why It Works, and How to Implement It in Your Firm. This month's podcasts are brought to you by life insurance innovator Haven Life. Haven Life Insurance Agency offers the first non-commission term life insurance that your clients can buy entirely online. The prices are affordable, the application process is simple, and the policies are fully backed by Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. Plus, some qualified, healthy applicants can even be approved for coverage without the need for a medical exam. This is life insurance the modern way. Visit havenlife.com/advisors to learn more about how Haven Life is partnering with fee-only financial advisors. Please note that the opinions expressed by participants on the podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Haven Life. Visit havenlife.com/advisors. Also be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask us questions, and more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Chloé. Hey, Chloé, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So I am finally, listeners know that I am just awful at actually getting podcasts recorded a decent ways out. So I am actually recording a few weeks out. So by the time listeners hear this, it will be long past. You are stuck in your home, it sounds like, because you're going through the giant ice storm of 2017 in the South, which anytime there's ice, it's a freak out moment. So are you well stocked with bread and ice cream and milk? Because those seem to be the three things people always bought.
Yes, actually, I went to the grocery store yesterday, and I forgot about it until I talked to a friend, and he said he was at the grocery store. So I was like, well, maybe I should head over there.
We always laughed. We went through several hurricanes, but, all the ice storms, because, of course, I'm from South Atlanta, and, the threat of snow, if on Friday there's a threat of snow, they go ahead and cancel Monday school just in case. So I remember getting a snow day, and it was like 60 degrees out because the weatherman had apparently been drinking. And it was always funny there. You go to the grocery store, there's no bread, there's no milk, and there's no ice cream. And I always wondered, what are you doing with the ice cream? Because, you're afraid the power's going out. Anyway, so thank you for joining us. This worked out well that you're a little stuck thanks to no one knowing how to drive in the ice and snow. So anyway, so to sort of kick things off, take us back to sort of talk me through your career path. What did you study in school? Sort of what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so I went to University of Alabama. And,
no, I did not know. Oh, man, we could just be done. That's wonderful. I grew up in Auburn. I can have nothing to do with Alabama. Anyway, all right. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. No, go ahead. UAB, that's fine. It's a fine school. We'll go with it.
But yeah, so I went to Alabama, and I originally started out as an athletic training major and exercise science minor. After I was in it for about a year, I realized I had to take a lot of biology and anatomy and just a lot of things that require memorization. And I've always been a math and logic reasoning kind of person. So I was like, this isn't going to work. So I just decided, I was like, I need to change my major. So I talked to my guidance counselor, and she was actually a certified financial planner. As you know, a lot of those majors are in the consumer sciences department. And so athletic training was actually in the same college. So it's pretty easy for me to make a change over into financial planning. And I was really intrigued just after talking to my guidance counselor. I started taking financial planning. I've never looked back. It's just been great. So
isn't it incredible that, like, had you gone a week later or a week before or got one counselor instead of another, you never would have heard about CFP. It's crazy that you actually had someone with a CFP. But I will say, I apologize for making fun of Alabama. For anybody that knows anything about the South, we are all about football, and Alabama tends to win a lot, so no one likes them. But there's two types of Alabama fans. There's the ones who can get into school there, and then the other 95%. And no one actually likes the 95%, but we all can appreciate the ones that are actually smart enough to get into the college, which you obviously were.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when I was in college, we went through, I think, 3 coaches, and we were on probation, and we were really bad. So yeah, it's
so
like
not quite as much crimson pride, I guess.
Yeah, these kids now just don't understand how hard we had it back then.
By the time this recording airs, I suspect Alabama will have won another national championship, and it's like 3 in 5 years. So, whatever. Better than Clemson, I guess. My dad will be so angry. He's an Auburn grad that I just said that. Anyway, so does Alabama have just like a full degree program, or is it more of an emphasis, like certificate program? Or I guess what's the structure there?
Yeah, it was a full degree. My major was actually consumer sciences, and then I had a concentration in family financial planning and counseling.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's sort of how we were set up at Georgia in the consumer econ. I got a BFSCS, not, most people got BS, so lots of letters, but it was like emphasis in financial planning. So, okay. So I guess once you started taking those classes, what was it that drew you into it? I mean, what did you like about financial planning from sort of what you were seeing in the coursework?
Well, the first thing was that it just came natural to me, and it was really easy. So I thought that was a good sign. And then also, it was just something that I hadn't really been exposed to or much. And so in my family life, I was raised by my grandmother. And so I remember she always had this hardback book, and the front of it said budget. And so she drew little lines. She had a ruler out, and she'd draw like little grid lines, and she kept her budget on it. And that was back in the day when her mortgage was like $150, which is crazy. But I remember her doing those types of things, and she raised, a lot of children. She was a widow. So I learned some basic things, but I didn't really get into a lot of detail. And so it just really intrigued me to be exposed to something that I wasn't exposed to in my childhood.
Okay. So what was your first job then out of college?
Yes. So when I graduated, I moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I started working for a small firm there. It was a small independent firm. And they had about 10 employees, and they were affiliated with Raymond James. So it was a fee-based hybrid model. And so I worked there for 2 years, and it was a good company. Really, I'd say operationally, they were the most solid company I've worked with so far. They had a process to everything they did. They were extremely organized. We had a lot of time to focus on working in our business and not, or on the business and not in the business. Our owner was a big fan of E-Myth. And so he required that everyone read E-Myth. We had a business coach that preached E-Myth. And so that kind of started my love of operations, just seeing how well that company was run. And then in addition to that, even though we were fee-based, we did comprehensive financial planning. And so we definitely, touched all the different areas. We were very high touch with our clients. Our owner had a good concentration in small business owners and doing a lot of business planning. So we had small business clients and a lot of corporate executives. And because they worked with a handful of corporations where they seemed to get a lot of retirees who came out of those corporations.
So what was your role there, sort of as an associate planner, or were you more on the operations side?
No, I started as an associate planner. And so yeah, I was doing the financial plans, and then we had dedicated people on the account administration side, and then we had, I guess, what you call like a relationship manager. And so it was kind of those different tiers that all worked with clients. And so yeah, I did a lot of the number crunching, preparing the financial plans and sitting in the meetings, taking notes, follow-up items, that type of thing.
What was sort of the promised career path when you went to that first job?
Yeah. So it was, we started as associate planners, and then we were supposed to kind of progress into the path of, I think at the time it was vice president. And so that person would, start to lead the meetings and just have a more active role in managing the client relationships. And then from there, it was supposed to go up into, an even higher management position. And so the problem there was, even though it was a well-run company and the people were great, it was a family-owned business at the end of the day. And so the owner's daughter and son-in-law were kind of, and going to step into the shoes of the owner eventually. And so I didn't see much of an opportunity there. And then on top of that, I just didn't like living in Baton Rouge. It just wasn't my type of city. And then going back to being an Alabama fan, LSU had just won the championship.
So it is time to get out.
But yeah, I really didn't like the city. And then I was there during Hurricane Katrina. And so on top of not liking the city, we go through this, massive hurricane, and our population literally doubles overnight. So you could just imagine the logistics of having your population double. And so it just wasn't a fun place to live. So the combination of that and then me not seeing a good career path is what led me to find other employment.
So real quick, with the E-Myth, and I'll admit this is on my short list of books I need to read, but I've never actually read it. Can you just sort of give me a quick high level of sort of what was the tenets of that book that that your boss and the business coach were pounding the table for?
Yeah, so basically the premise is that there's 3 types of people required to run a good company. And so the first is a technician, which most of us start as technicians or are technicians, myself included. And so the technician is the person who enjoys the work and gets the work done. And so typically they're not the best at thinking of big concepts or coming up with new ideas, that type of thing. The other type is the entrepreneur. So they're the big picture, big thinker, but they don't necessarily like to get into the details. And then the third type is a manager. So they, manage the people, manage the business. And so you kind of need all 3 of those types in order to run a successful business. And so just acknowledging what your type is and then finding other people to pull in to help you in the other aspects is good. And then it also talked about the franchise model, which is so successful because, just having procedures in place and having a way that you run your business so that, if you lose employees, you can bring someone else in, easily train them. And we had a procedures manual for the company, and every single position was completely outlined. So it was really, really helpful in that aspect as well.
And we're sort of going through this at the XY Planning Network, just in terms of outlining procedures and process and all that. And it is overwhelming to do because when you first start, it's so much. Because you make a list of projects and tasks, recurring things that you do, and it's just pages and pages long. But over time, you really do start to see the value. And it sounds like E-Myth, like many business books, when I get to the end of it, I feel like I should have already known that, but I didn't. I felt like I could have written that book, but I couldn't have even verbalized any of this stuff because it's almost so obvious that it's hard to get your mind wrapped around. I love books. I love business books like that. So anyway, but I digress. So, okay. So the first job, obviously sort of kind of ran through your time there. So what was then the next position?
Yes. So just after Katrina, I just wanted to kind of get closer to home. And so I found a position in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was a small firm as well. They had about 5 employees. It was also a fee-based hybrid model. They were affiliated with Triad Advisors out of Norcross, Georgia. So they were interesting in the sense that I'd say about half of their business was, financial planning, investment management, and it was also comprehensive in nature. The other part of their business was non-qualified deferred comp, and they had qualified plans as well. So that was a totally different, just exposure to a totally different thing that I didn't know much about. So we were able to work with a lot of corporate executives. Their clients were mostly hospitals. I think they just kind of found a niche with hospitals. but they worked with a lot of the executives there and the HR departments there to set up these non-qualified deferred comp plans.
How did you go about getting the expertise in that? Because, they got mentioned like, one paragraph of that in the CFP material. So was it just learning on the job from experts, or was there some sort of course or certification you went through to become an expert on that?
No, I just learned on the job. Luckily, there's a woman there who's actually still there. She's probably the most well-versed person with retirement plans that I've ever met. I mean, she loves it, is passionate about it. I learned a lot from her. So yeah, just learning on the job.
I'm always fascinated by how those niche expertise, how they develop, since it's so basically you just got to go read a bunch of legal jargon to try to start piecing it together. It's hard to even know who to call. But were you an associate advisor there as well? Was it sort of a linear move from your prior job?
Yeah, it was a linear move, and kind of with the promise that it would be more, so, which is typical. But yeah, so it was very linear in nature. I probably could have had a chance to move up in that company over time, but again, I just didn't see it happening the time frame that I thought was reasonable. And I also didn't want to stay in Alabama for the rest of my life, so I just wanted to get away. So I stayed there for about a year.
So at this point, have you gotten your CFP?
Oh, yes. So when I was in Baton Rouge, I started there in June after I graduated. And by that December, I'd taken my Series 763, my life insurance license. And then the following February, I took the CFP and passed it.
Good gracious. You were studying more after college than you probably did in college.
Yeah. I just wanted to get it all over with. And then they also had incentives. So they started me at a lower salary. And so it's basically like an outline that said, each test you pass, we're going to give you a raise. That's kind of just the way they had their compensation structured. So I was very motivated to get those things completed as soon as possible. So yeah, I'd already done all that.
Okay, so you already had that. So this is sort of a random question, but because I've never taken the Series 7, since you did them basically back to back, how do those tests compare? Because I think we have a lot of listeners that have the 7 and are thinking about the CFP. Are they, pretty similar in terms of concepts, or are they just completely different tests?
Oh, they're completely different. Series 7 is definitely investment focused, and I'm not sure if it's the same now, but when I took it, it was a lot of options. That was a huge portion of the test, which I've never used any of that information. But yeah, it's completely different.
Okay. Yeah, I've had folks say that, Series 7 hardest test they've ever taken, and they've asked, is the CFP harder or easier? And honestly, don't know. I just know they're both very comprehensive, just comprehensive about different things, I guess.
Yeah, if you haven't taken the CFP and you've just taken your 7 and 63 and a life insurance license, it's definitely the hardest of those three.
So, all right. So you've been in Birmingham for a year to this point and decide to start looking outside the state. So then is that what took you to Atlanta then?
So yeah, I just started looking around. I looked at some positions in Nashville and Atlanta and just kind of the surrounding areas. And so I was able to find a trust company here in Atlanta, and I think I just found them through the NAPFA website or FPA. I was just looking for open job positions, and so I found out about a trust company here, and they were a Southeastern-based trust company who had 3 locations. They had one in Atlanta and one in Nashville, and their headquarters were in Memphis. I applied for the Atlanta position, and I actually got it. So I ended up moving about a year later to Atlanta, and then I've been here ever since.
So about a year later, so you worked there for a year before you actually moved?
Yeah, well, I worked in the position in Birmingham for a year.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant you were still in Birmingham working in Atlanta. I was about to say I have made that drive a lot. That is a long drive. Okay. So been in Atlanta ever since. And you, since we're both from Atlanta, we can say this, that neither of us are actually from Atlanta, I believe. The beauty of Atlanta is everyone from the state of Georgia is either from Atlanta or South Georgia. There is really no other option. But so before the call started, you mentioned you were sort of in the Marietta area. Has that been home since you got to Atlanta?
I lived in Smyrna when I first moved here, so not too far.
Yeah. All North Atlanta. But Atlanta's actually had sort of a resurgence over the last, 10 years. So it's a little too hot for me, but there seems to be a lot going on there just in terms of food and culture and the arts and just all of those various things are actually sort of coming back to Atlanta. It was not there when I was growing up, but it seems to be a cooler city to live in. But so for listeners that are not necessarily familiar with trust companies, what is the difference between a trust company and a financial planning firm? I guess how would you classify the differences between those?
I'd say the biggest difference is just how they're regulated. They're regulated by banks. And so, and most trust companies come out of banks, and then there's a few independent trust companies. Generally speaking, they work with higher net worth clients because they can serve as trustee or co-trustee of a client's trust. And also as an executor for the client's estate. So when you're getting into clients who have trust, it's typically wealthier clients and wealthier families.
Okay. So you're specializing in clients that actually have trust that then y'all can manage. Is that sort of where the income comes from?
Yeah, so we manage the investments, and then we also do the trust administration, the trust accounting, and we're responsible for not preparing, but overseeing the preparation of tax returns, et cetera.
Okay. So what was your role there? Was it also sort of associate advisor type role?
Yes, so I started out as a client service associate or client service manager. So I did financial planning there too. We had kind of 3 core services. The first was investment management. And the second was trustee services. And then the third was financial advisory or financial planning. So I worked as a financial planner there. When I started, I had my 3 years of experience. So I just officially become a CFP. And so I was working on just comprehensive plans there for clients and, just sitting in client meetings again. And eventually I was there for 7 years. So over that time, I started to lead my own meetings and have my own client relationships that I was responsible for.
7 years is a long time. I mean, especially because I know I've been in your shoes sort of coming into that job where it's like you feel like you're job hopping a little bit, third job in basically 3 years for you, sort of at the end of 3 years. And I guess I'm wondering too, is it frustrating to kind of to keep moving jobs and stay client associate? I mean, were you pushing to try to be a lead advisor at that point, or were you sort of okay with staying associate advisor for a time until, they felt like you were ready to move up?
Yeah. So, I mean, with my first move, I was okay because I just knew that I was still pretty new into the business. Once I came to the trust company, I was okay with it for a little bit, but I definitely wanted to move my way up. Again, I was basically told that, stay here for a little bit, we'll, promote you. And at the time they had, all these vice presidents, kind of similar to the bank structure. I mean, there's tons of vice presidents, but it doesn't really mean anything.
In title only. You get a fancy title and you get a fancy title.
So for some reason, once like I said, there were a ton of vice presidents. So for some reason, once I got there, shortly after I got there, all of a sudden there was some meaning to the term vice president. So they kind of stopped promoting people. So I was there for a little bit before I actually officially became a vice president. And then they kind of restructured the titles again and made different requirements. And came up with a couple of other positions in between. So there was a lot of restructuring while I was there.
All right. So you were there for 7 years, sort of moved your way up into lead advisor, actually leading client relationships and client meetings and that sort of thing. So what was the next transition? I'd say about 5 years in, I was just not really happy. I felt like I was working really hard. I was putting in a lot of hours. I was constantly learning new things and pushing myself, but I just wasn't going anywhere. So it's almost like I was chasing a moving target. And then on top of that, I just didn't feel comfortable. I feel like I just didn't feel, comfortable with the types of clients that I was working with and the environment that I was in. I wanted to work with people who are a little more down to earth, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to get out of that environment. So I kind of struggled along for 2 years, and my management changed a little bit over those times. And my immediate manager, towards the late part of my career there, he kind of knew I was unhappy. And so we talked a lot about just
things that we could do to make things better for me. And overall, it just didn't work out. And then also, when I first started there, we had about, I think, 40 to 50 employees, and we had 3 offices. And so the Atlanta office had about 12 employees. And so over the 7 years I was there, we doubled in size, and we added a 4th office. And so we went to almost 100 employees and 4 offices. And at that point, they decided to centralize management and centralize operations, because everybody kind of all 3 offices kind of worked as their own independent offices that shared the same name. But as they got bigger, they were like, okay, we need to centralize the management and operations. And so that kind of turned it into a corporate America environment and really changed things. So I definitely wasn't a big fan of that. You know, as I said, I worked for a company that had 10 employees, and then the company had 5 employees. So to go from that to a corporate environment was just not my thing. So yeah, just the combination of all those things just really led me to find something different. And so about 2 years ago, I decided to leave the trust company. And so since I did have relationships that I managed, I transitioned out over a couple of months. I really didn't know what I was going to do or where I was going to go. I originally thought I was just going to work for another small company. I ended up finding an opportunity that kind of led to me starting a business. And so one of the old principals at the trust company, he had left right when I started, and he started his own RIA firm. And so he was still a client of ours, because we had our own common trust funds and our own private equity funds. So his clients were still invested in our funds, even though he had his own separate RIA. I ended up managing that relationship towards the end of my time there. And when he found out I was leaving, he said he wanted to meet with me. And so we talked, and he originally wanted me to work with him full time. And I just wanted to kind of assess my options. So I didn't want to do that. So we kind of worked out something to where I could work with him on a part-time contract basis. And basically he would outsource his financial planning work to me. Started a company and set up an LLC.
So that's basically doing outsourced paraplanning, I guess, is the way that we would phrase that.
Yeah, but it's a little bit different just because his clients were very similar to the trust company clients. So a lot of the clients had taxable estates and more complex estate planning and tax planning needs. So it was a lot more than, just data entry into planning.
You weren't just doing plan writing. You were actually lead advisor for those clients at that point on the planning side?
Not for the RIAs, not for the RIA worked with. But no, I mean, he outsourced the work to me, the planning work, but the planning work itself was a lot more complex.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because most folks take I'm going to start a business. How do I make extra money? I guess I'll go do virtual paraplanning. For you, it sounds like the opposite of like, hey, there's this really cool opportunity, but I don't want to work here full time. How do I make this part time? And then I'm assuming that's sort of what led to then you ultimately launching your own RIA.
Yeah. So for the last 2 years, I've been working as a consultant. And so my clients are RIAs. And so I started with that first client. And then over time, I added additional clients, and they outsourced financial planning work to me as well. And then just going back to my operations experience that I had, a lot of people also found that valuable. So I found some RAs, especially solo practitioners or just smaller firms who really, really needed help on the operations side. So my consulting firm that I have basically does financial planning, outsource financial planning work. And then I also do some operations and practice management consulting as well. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Do you have any additional employees, or is it just you at this point?
It's just me. I've hired temporary help when I needed it, but yeah, it's just me.
Okay, that's awesome. So digging into that a little bit, where do you find those RIAs? I mean, is it just word of mouth, or are you actively seeking out opportunities with different RIAs?
Yeah, a lot of it was just word of mouth. And so since a lot of financial advisors know each other, I got another client from the original RIA that I still work with. He had a friend who had an RIA as well and needed some help. And he's like, hey, call Chloe. So yeah, I just got referrals from that. And then I'm an active member of the Financial Planning Association and an estate planning group here. So just from going out and networking, talking to advisors, yeah, that's how I built my business.
So how do you actually do planning for them? Are you leveraging their systems, sort of their technology, their e-money license or Redtail license or whatnot? Or did you set everything up on your end to be able to sort of manage on your side? Or is it different per advisor?
Everything is with the advisor. So whatever they have set up, I just use their systems. And typically I'm working with advisors who have higher net worth clients and who have more complex financial planning needs. And so a lot of them don't use software, or if they do, they only use it for a certain portion. A lot of the work that I do is just from my trust company days. I do a lot of, reading wills, reading trusts, diagramming them, summarizing them, a lot of heavy tax planning. So a lot of those things you can't really plug into software easily.
Right. Especially just not all the variables to get there. So I'm assuming a lot of custom Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, a lot of it's custom by hand. And so, yeah, it's a little bit different. And even with the RIAs that I work with, I kind of realized that just based on my skill set, I was attracting advisors who had higher net worth clients and more complex needs, that they couldn't really bring someone in at a paraplanner level or at a, with little or no experience.
And on a part-time level too, right? Like we talk a lot about as you grow your RIA, you may need some additional help, but hiring full-time from the moment you need any help is tough. So I wonder if they're in that same position where they're saying, hey, we need part-time help, but we can't just go get, a kid off the street that just graduated college. Like we need somebody who has actually done this type of work before. And I doubt there are very many folks that have that level of trust experience in working with high net worth clients that are excited to work 5 or 10 hours a week for an advisory firm, and they probably love it. So I imagine that's a really good match. With you said you do some operations and practice management consulting. Is that for the same advisors that you're doing some of the outsourced work for, or do you have other advisors coming to you to help them build out operations manuals and procedure manuals and that sort of thing?
Well, I do some of it with my financial planning clients, and then I only have one client that I strictly do operations.
Awesome. So then are you working with clients directly at this point, or is all of your work primarily through sort of these advisor channels?
So it's a little bit of both. So I'll kind of fast forward a little bit. Earlier this year, I decided to start my own RIA and focus on young professionals and just people who have higher incomes, but not much in the way of assets. I saw the opportunity because a lot of the advisors I work with, they have, $1 million minimums or, $2.5 million minimums. And so they were turning clients away, and they're like, hey, can we possibly send these people to you? Or what do we do with these people? Because they just weren't good fits. And so I really saw an opportunity. And then also I kind of wanted to branch out and get away from working with ultra high net worth clients and just kind of work with the everyday person. And so just the combination of those things kind of led me to starting my own RIA. And then with the space that I'm working on the consulting side, I knew it wasn't a conflict because I'm not going after the same types of clients that the advisors I work with are going after.
That's such an awesome path to have taken because And I don't know, maybe you're more forward thinking than I am. So maybe you actually had this all laid out on exactly how this would work out. But looking back, hindsight's 2020. But it's like you start consulting work for high net worth advisors. You establish that niche. You get really good at it. You get a few advisors under your belt. So you've got income coming in. You're doing what you're good at. And then when you launch an RIA, you're able to actually get referrals from the advisors that you're working with because they don't want the clients that you're going to be working with. And truth is, you don't want the clients they're working with. You're working with enough of those. So it really is a match made in heaven. That's so fantastic.
Yeah, because it's great for me because even though I enjoy working with younger clients more, I didn't want to lose all of the technical skills that I've developed working with high net worth clients. So it kind of allows me to do a little bit of both.
So what percentage of your time at this point is spent on your RIA, and then what percentage is in the business consulting firm?
Yeah, so it's about half and half. And so I officially launched my RIA just a few months ago, so I'm pretty new. But yeah, it's about half and half. And my long-term plan is to kind of keep it that way. I have, good income coming in from consulting. I'm able to pay my bills from my consulting work. And so I don't think I'm going to take on any additional clients at this point, but I'll continue serving the clients that I do work with. So yeah, I'll probably continue to do that. And then I want to build up my RIA. And I have a certain number of clients that I want to reach there. And then once I hit those clients, I'm going to stop. And so I'll kind of have both streams of income.
Okay, that makes sense. What is your goal then on the RIA? How many clients do you see yourself being able to serve if it's 50% of your focus?
My goal is 50 clients.
Okay. Do you have sort of a time frame for that on when you'd like to be there?
Yes. So my goal is to have that by the end of 2019. So it's kind of a 3-year plan.
So 36 months, well, plus a few extra getting started at the end of 2016. Okay, so 50 clients in 36 months, which is a stretch, but not crazy. I mean, that's certainly not like, oh, I can sit back and just sort of chill and see what happens. But it's also not like you don't have to invest $1 million in marketing to get there either. So, and is that sort of based on, is it an income target that you have that you've just said, I want to make this much money and sort of backed into what, that 50 clients is the number that makes sense?
Yes. So yeah, exactly. So I have a total income target and I have my income that I'm making from my consulting work. And then once I add in my income that I'm projected to make with my RIA, then I'll hit my total.
All right. That's awesome. And I think that is something that not enough advisors do, is actually before they start a business is sit down and actually ask themselves the question of how much money do I want to make? How much do I have to make? What's the need? Which, you built that up on the consulting side to be sure that you had a roof over your head and food to eat. But then where do you actually need to be? Because I think we have this tendency to always need more and always want more. And, 50,000 turns into 100,000, turns into 200,000, but being really clear on your target, because then you'll actually know when you hit it, and in 12 months and 24 months, we could revisit these numbers and say, hey, are we on track? Are we not? What adjustments do we need to make? But if you're just like, I just want to grow, it's like, okay, that's, how do we define that better? So I commend you for being willing to actually sit down and map that out, because I think that's very uncommon right now.
I'm very purpose driven and yeah, I love setting goals for myself and just really focusing on those things. And so for me, I also had, just my lifestyle goals that I wanted and just things that I wanted to do throughout my lifetime. And so part of that is ever since I've been in college, I've just always wanted to get to the point where I can work part-time and volunteer part-time. So I definitely want to get to the point where even though I volunteer now, it's a little more sporadic, but I want to get to the point where I am dedicated and volunteering on a consistent basis.
Do you have a process that you went through or go through in terms of goal setting? I mean, or is it just sort of sit down and map out your goals, or is it something more structured that you have to sort of come up with all of this for yourself?
No, unfortunately, it's not very structured. I just try to sit down at the end of each year and set goals for myself and become fascinated with the idea of a bullet journal. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's kind of a journal that you keep, and it's handwritten. So, because there's power to writing things down, but it's just a journal that you keep. And once you set your goals for the year in the journal, you start to, it's a systematic process of tracking your goals and making sure that you're on target.
That's awesome. I just Googled it. So bulletjournal.com. We'll link to it in the show notes. But to me, it looks like it's basically taking us back. I like it when old becomes new again, because this looks like what you described that your grandmother used to budget. And now we just brought out a new one and charged 10 times the price. And now it's really cool. But it's awesome for that stuff to come back and be able to say, hey, these are things that, that we're losing by maybe an over-reliance on digital, and being able to sort of bring it back to be able to set goals. And, you jokingly said that you don't have a structured process, but just sitting down annually and actually looking at your goals and thinking through having just clear space and dedicated time to say, what do I actually want? What do I want to do this year? What do I want to do in 3, 5, 10 years? I think is really powerful. And it's something that I have a terrible habit of doing personally. I've gotten better about doing it business-wise just because I have a business partner that forces it, and employees. So we have to actually tell them what we think we're doing instead of making it look quite as haphazard as sometimes it feels in my head. But I think that's awesome to be able to sit down and actually say, what are my personal goals, financial goals, with balancing with volunteering and, what you want to do in the business world and travel and just all of those things, and being able to sort of keep yourself accountable there. So do you plan to take on employees at any point, or is your vision to really just keep it solo with the two businesses and sort of see how it goes?
Yeah, so my plan is to probably get maybe 2 part-time associates and just someone to help me with all the administrative stuff, and then someone to help me with some of the planning work. I mean, beyond that, and just hiring temps as I need them, I think I'll be okay.
Yeah. All right. I mean, and 50 clients, that sounds about right. I mean, that it's totally manageable by yourself or with a few part-time folks. If you had a full-time person, they would probably be bored once you had 50 clients and weren't growing anymore. So.
And I'm very good about, just procedures and processes. So I have a mammoth of a spreadsheet, just with all of my onboarding process and just all of my different things that I do. So it just kind of helps me to keep on track and keep as efficient as possible with serving clients. And then it also will help me when I hire people with training and different things like that.
Just to be able to hand them the process. So we did an episode 3 or 4 episodes ago, Kitsis and I talked through sort of hiring the first employee, because going from just yourself to 2 is a really big leap. It's amazing. And we were talking through some of the strategies around delegating tasks and that sort of thing. He and I are both more of the like, oh crap, we have to hire someone, and oh crap, we have to hand all this off to them. How do we do it? You're in a much better position, which is you already have everything outlined. So hiring someone becomes much easier, and they're going to be much happier because they actually have a written process to follow instead of, being like, oh, let me watch you do this thing so I can learn how to do it and ask questions later. So I guess I was going to ask sort of what's next, but it sounds like you've sort of laid the foundation. Do you have any big projects or anything that you're going to be working on in 2017 to sort of continue to move you towards this goal that you have for the next 3 years?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of 2 organizations, and that's been taking a good bit of my time. And so one is the professional organization, and it's the Association of African American Financial Advisors. And so I'm the treasurer for that, and I'm also, go figure. And then I'm also the treasurer for a nonprofit here, just a local small nonprofit. So both of those things are, I'm hoping to get a lot more involved with those 2 things this year, and kind of helps with my vision of, of creating diversity within our industry, and then also doing some nonprofit work.
So the organization that you mentioned, I also hear it called Quad A, which we had Stacy from our team and Scott both attended Quad A last year. So can you give listeners just a overview of that organization? Because I think it's definitely one that folks need to know about.
Yeah, definitely. So Quad A is really it was started by the first Black certified financial planner. And it was originally started out as a local organization in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So in the last couple of years, they've gone national, and they've actually been the pre-conference to the National FPA conference. So just to help get the word out there. And a lot of the people on the board or past board presidents have been highly involved with FPA, NAPFA, and just kind of helping to spread the word on creating diversity and opportunities for people of color in our industry.
I think we can all honestly say financial planning is, as I was told recently, male, pale, and stale. We are a group of old white guys, and our clients tend to be old white guys. And so as a young woman of color, what's been your experience in financial planning? Is it the old boys club that sort of what it looks like, I guess, from your view, and are there barriers that you've had to overcome? Or I guess I'll let you just answer what has been your experience there?
Yeah, definitely. I have experienced a lot of obstacles, and as I mentioned earlier, just kind of chasing a moving target and just never feeling like you're getting promoted, or never feeling like you're getting the accolades that you deserve. So that has been a little bit hard for me. And just in each of my jobs, I've had different experiences that were a little unpleasant. And it's definitely been difficult to kind of navigate through that. I always say that if I wasn't so passionate about financial planning or just about this industry in general, I probably would have given up a long time ago.
That pains me to hear. I won't ask for any details that you don't want to share, but it is painful for me to hear that someone who is passionate about financial planning that's not enough, that there's just so much in the way of folks that are coming in. And I mean, honestly, you're kind of the trifecta, right? Like that, not only female person of color coming into the planning, and you're young, right? Like you're hitting all three pieces at one time, which I have a lot of respect for you in the fact that you were willing to take that on and have persevered in the face of that, because as a white male, I don't quite understand what you've gone through in order to get to where you're at. But what can we do? You know, again, as a white dude, I'm sitting here going like, well, I don't quite understand. I understand the young part, and I've fought that battle, but I've only had to, fight one of the three battles. So what can we do, either as individuals or just as a profession? I mean, what needs to happen so that in 10 years, I can have a conversation with someone in your shoes and them not say that they're running into these same obstacles that you ran into?
I think the biggest thing is just for people who are in a position of privilege or in a position of power, for those people to recognize that that it exists, that there is privilege, and there are some opportunities that you're afforded that maybe I'm not afforded, no matter how hard I work. And just acknowledging that, and then talking about it, and helping the people who don't have that level of privilege and power.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation, and one that inside of XYPN we've been having with a few of our members that are just really passionate about how do we leverage XY Planning Network to make a difference. And so we've sort of recently gone through our, for lack of a better term, I guess, diversity initiatives. And it's so interesting to me that like all the diversity initiatives, when it comes back down to it, it's like, don't be an ass. Like that's the core of like everything that we do, is just like get out of the way. Just like, don't be an ass, and this will be fine. But unfortunately, we're trying to convince a lot of people to do it that way, who don't necessarily realize that they're being that way, which is sad.
I think things will slowly improve over time, because I feel like our generation is just more open for whatever reasons. I feel like that in itself is going to be helpful.
Agreed. I do think that the younger generation is coming in with less, just they grew up in a different time, and it's not an excuse. It's just a reality, though, that when you have a group of advisors that median age is 57, we do have a group of a lot of older planners that came from a different era, which again is not an excuse by any means, but that fortunately that bias I don't think has translated or been transferred down to the younger generations, which will be helpful. So, and I do have listeners that'll reach out that will say that, they're really looking for, I guess they're sort of already running into some of these obstacles, or they're a young woman that's attended their first conference and like they couldn't find any other women there, which is very common at national conferences. So I guess for our younger listeners, maybe in college, what are your recommendations if they are female or a person of color, or just, that are just coming from a different background? How do they set themselves up for success and not just get burnt out at their first job when they do have a bad experience, which may ultimately and sadly be inevitable?
Yeah, so there's not too much you can do as far as changing your environment, with the workplace, but just helping yourself as far as getting support from people who can relate to you and who can understand where you're coming from. And there's just so many with the CFP board, the FPA. They're all really working on a lot of diversity initiatives right now. And so the more we can find other female advisors or other advisors of color and support each other, I think that's really powerful.
Totally agree. And that's been sort of our decision, is to leverage what CFP board, NAFA, and FPA are doing, because they, instead of recreating the wheel, sort of see how we can piggyback, I guess, or support some of those initiatives, because I hate to see initiatives not work simply because they don't have enough people involved, because you got 4 different organizations trying to do the same thing, but no one person can be serving in all 4 of those opportunities. But and I think the other piece to this is, if you ever, my plea to anyone who sees racism or bias or discrimination going on, whether it's explicit, which is very obvious to see, but sometimes it's, implicit bias that you'll hear in management meetings, or you'll hear different things happen, just speak up, just say something, because I don't think enough people are willing to say something for fear of their job or fear of retribution or whatnot. But ultimately, that's got to be where it starts, is calling out the situations. Because again, I think there are a lot of people that ultimately are biased, and I don't know that they realize it. I'm not sure if they realize that they're making decisions to not promote someone simply because they're a female and they don't think they're ready, or, oh, well, she may go have kids in a few years, so we can't make her a lead planner. They may not realize just how much of a jerk that makes them. And one, it's illegal, but two, it's just wrong. So, if you have someone saying things like that, call them out. Be willing to say, hey, that's not cool. We're not going to operate this business that way, because ultimately there will be plenty of other opportunities for you if you're the one that takes a stand and it doesn't work out. So, but anyway, so Chloé, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show again on a icy Saturday when you are stuck in your home, because again, the South, if there's the threat of snow, everything shuts down. So I understand that it's not a good time to go out, but thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your story. I am so excited to revisit with you in the next year and two, and then year 3 to see how you're progressing towards your goals and what new opportunities have come up, because it sounds like you're a driven rock star. So more opportunities are going to present themselves. So it'll be interesting to see which direction, ultimately you end up going.
Thank you.
This month's podcasts are brought to you by life insurance innovator Haven Life. Haven Life Insurance Agency offers the first non-commission term life insurance that your clients can buy entirely online. The prices are affordable, the application process is simple, and the policies are fully backed by Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company. Plus, some qualified, healthy applicants can even be approved for coverage without the need for a medical exam. This is life insurance the modern way. Visit havenlife.com/advisors to learn more about how Haven Life is partnering with fee-only financial advisors. Please note that the opinions expressed by participants on the podcast are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Haven Life. Visit havenlife.com/advisors. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.